Welcome to the show. I have a great show planned for you this week. Later on, I'll have with me Eriks Janelsins, who is the president and CEO of the Oglebay Foundation. We'll be talking about all the things that the Oglebay Foundation does to support the parks, also maybe what you can do to help the parks. But first, we'll start with some of our usual features. And I want to start off talking about, Thanksgiving is coming up, and we're only a week away. And, sometimes we don't think about, or think enough perhaps, about the reasons that we have to give thanks. And this past week was my dad's birthday, and I was thinking, reflecting on some of the things he used to always tell me and some of the lessons he'd share with me. And one of the things he would always tell me is count your blessings. And so many times, I don't do that enough. I think we all don't do that enough. We sometimes tend to think about the problems in our life or things that are going wrong. And I would say back to him, well, Dad, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with this. And he said, well, count your blessings each day, but start like this. I'm thankful that I woke up in a bed. I'm thankful that I have a toothbrush today. I'm thankful that I have water. And then go on and on and on and on. And so many of the things that we take for granted truly are blessings. When you start counting them up in a day, and the fact that maybe I have socks to put on, or I have a pair of shoes that doesn't have holes in it, or whatever those things may be, and you think about all the things that you're blessed with, it really does start to minimize whatever may be troubling you or whatever is a concern in your life. And so I think that with Thanksgiving coming up, it's a good time to think about those things that we can give thanks for, the things that we're blessed by. And I think we can also be a lot happier if we start off each day thinking about the things that we're thankful for and giving thanks for that. So something there I've just been thinking about, and I know this year's been particularly difficult for so many people. I've heard so many people say, well, I just can't wait for 2020 to be over. And unfortunately, I don't think there's going to be some type of magic wand that is waved when it turns January 1, 2021, that's all of a sudden everything's going to be fine and back to normal. But we hope that once we get through 2021, things start to move back toward normal. But in the meantime, despite all the difficulties and challenges that we're facing, let's continue to give thanks, especially this Thanksgiving week coming up. I'll give you a legal tip here this week, and I want to talk about jury duty. A lot of people wonder, well, what's it going to be like if I get called for jury duty? So here's what typically happens. You'll get a little postcard in the mail, and it says you have to call in on a certain night, usually the night before that your jury service would begin, to see if the trial is still on or if it's been continued or settled, or a plea bargain in a criminal case, whatever it may be. But if you do have to, you call in the night before and they'll tell you, yeah, you need to show up. So if you do show up, what's going to happen is that you'll typically be in a courtroom with a lot of people. Now, there's some changes because of the pandemic, and there's sometimes not doing it in the courtroom or not as many people. So I'm going to talk to you about how it typically works. But there are some modifications going on right now. But typically, you'd be in the courtroom with a bunch of people, say, 40, 50 people who've all been called for jury duty for that day. And then the clerk will take roll to make sure that you've shown up. Now, if you haven't shown up, you can be in contempt of court. Judges can go out and have the sheriff's department haul you in, things of that nature. So you want to make sure you show up if you're called for jury duty. But then once you're there, they'll take roll, and then they'll start pulling names out to determine who's going to go up there into the panel. So your name gets pulled, so they'll pull a certain number of names, and you'll go up and sit in the jury box. And then they'll start asking the lawyers. Usually the judge and the lawyers both will ask what's called voir dire. That's basically where you're asked questions to determine whether or not there's anything in your background experiences that would perhaps make you not the best person to sit on a jury in that particular case. So you may be qualified in general to be a juror because you're the right age and you're a citizen of the county and things like that. But there may be things specific to that case. For example, say it has to do with some type of insurance claim, and you currently have an insurance claim pending against the same company. Well, you might not be the best type of person to be on that case. You may be perfectly qualified to be a juror in a medical case or a criminal case or some other type, but you might not be the right type of person to be currently sitting in an insurance case when you have a claim against the same company. Or say somebody that's going to be a witness. They'll read off a list of witnesses, and your best friend is going to be one of the witnesses, and they say, well, do you think you could listen to them? Would you give them any more weight or credibility than other witnesses? And you say, well, yeah, I probably would because I know them really well. You might not be the best person to be on that particular case. So they go through all those questions and determine if anyone is disqualified for what's called cause, meaning that there's some reason that you are not appropriate to be on that case. And then after they do that, then each side gets to use what are called peremptory strikes to knock off certain people from the panel just because of maybe answers they gave that wouldn't automatically disqualify you or disqualify you as a matter of law, but it makes the person a little bit uneasy about you being on the jury. And then you're left with the jury panel after those strikes take place. Then you'll be sworn in as a juror, and the trial will begin. And trials can take anywhere from a day to, gosh, sometimes weeks, typically somewhere in between, usually a couple of days for a trial, maybe 2-3 days would be your typical trial. But there'll be breaks during the course of the day. You'll usually in the morning, the judge will take a break where you'll get 10 or 15 minutes to go get a drink, use the restroom, make a phone call if you need to. Then you'll come back out and you hear the rest of it. You get a lunch break for like an hour, and then you go through the afternoon, usually till about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and then you're done for the day. You come back the next day. So that goes on for however many days the trial takes. And then at the end of the trial, you go back into the jury room with your fellow jurors and you elect a foreperson who's the one that's basically helps to conduct the deliberations, make sure that everything's being done orderly, make sure all the evidence is there, and then announces the verdict when you return to the courtroom. And it can take various amounts of time for a jury to deliberate. Sometimes it can take an hour. In fact, once, I think the first trial I ever had, I won that case in 40 minutes or so. I was really surprised the jury came back that quick, and I was pleased because I won, but it was only a 40-minute deliberation. And sometimes deliberations can take multiple days. I've had them where a jury's deliberated over a 2-day period before reaching a verdict. So, but the verdict has to be unanimous in West Virginia. Other states have difference. For example, in Ohio, in a civil trial, 6 out of 8 people on the jury have to agree. In West Virginia, in a civil trial, all 6 out of 6 have to agree. So there's 8 jurors in Ohio, but only 6 have to agree. In West Virginia, it has to be 6 out of 6. And then a criminal trial, of course, it has to be unanimous as well. And then once the jury reaches a unanimous verdict, then you go into the courtroom and the foreperson announces or delivers the verdict. And then basically, usually the judge will thank you for your service and you're dismissed and you don't get called for jury duty again in most counties for a couple of years. But that's the basic process of it. A lot of people wonder, well, do I get excused from work? Well, you are, excused from work. That doesn't mean you get paid. Basically, to be a juror, you get paid your mileage and things like that to get to the courthouse. But it is a civic duty, and I use that word very meaningfully. The word duty. It can be a sacrifice, but almost every person that I've talked to that has served on a jury comes out of it saying that it was a very meaningful experience to them, one that they enjoyed and wasn't at all what they thought it would be going in, and they come out saying, I'm really glad that I served. And it really is a service. It's a service to your community, it's a service to the court, it's a service to the people that have a very meaningful reason for being there, and the outcome is going to affect their life in some way. So it is important to do. So if you do get called for jury duty, go into it with an open mind of saying, you know what, I'm probably going to come out of this saying this was a good experience. I'll also give you a quote this week, and this comes from Aristotle, so a very, very old quote here, but he said, the end of labor is to gain leisure. And I thought that was particularly interesting because we do spend a lot of our lives working, and we think, what am I doing this for? Okay. But ultimately, he said it's to gain leisure, and the idea is that if I work hard, then I have the ability to be able to do some things that I want to do, to be able to rest, to be able to do fun things, and to maybe be able to retire someday and still have the money there to support myself. So there is a purpose toward the labor, and we have to be mindful of that, and that is to ultimately gain leisure. Speaking of leisure, after we take a break, I'll have with me Eriks Janelsins from the Oglebay Foundation. We'll be talking all about Oglebee, which is one of my favorite places to have some leisure time. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
Recommended by the highest authorities. Danoon Lumber.
It's like a bad one's coming. Yeah, right?
Our team at Wheeling Island Hotel Casino Racetrack has been working hard to play it safe. So when you play here, you're safe here. And as promised, we're bringing back many of the amenities you've asked for. Our table games are back in action and featured in a new location. Our hotel is now taking reservations, and we've expanded our food options. Our team is committed to play it safe by giving you a fun and safe Wheeling Island experience.
Welcome back to the show. This is my favorite time each week when I have a guest with me, and this week's no different. I have with me Eriks Janelsins, who is the president and CEO of the Oglebay Foundation. Eric, thanks for being here on the show.
Thanks so much for the invitation.
people hear Oglebay Foundation and they may think, what's the Oglebay Foundation? Because people have heard of Oglebee or Oglebay Park or this or that, but they're like, what's the Oglebay Foundation? And that's what you deal with.
Yeah, so my work at the Oglebay Foundation is really to work with donors who love the park and want to make investments in the future of the park. So we have a great group of people, thousands of people, many of those that live in Wheeling, but some that grew up in Wheeling and they live across the country now. And some people that just visit Oglebay and they love it, they've had a great experience, they've had great family experiences, and they want to make it better. So they make gifts. And so our work really is to facilitate those gifts, make it really fun. Making a gift to support the park is a great fun experience, and that's my job. And then we work with the Park Commission staff to make sure we invest in the right project and that the donors' wishes or their restrictions are followed. So that's really kind of our technical job. But we work on big plans. So the ice rink's a great example this year, right? So we did a big renovation of the ice rink, and we worked with lots of donors across the community to make those investments in the park. So $1.3 million was invested in the ice rink, and it came from hundreds and hundreds of people, and we gathered all that together.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that because you mentioned thousands of people support the Oglebay Foundation, and I know sometimes people may think, well, look, I'm not a millionaire. I don't have all this money to give, but a lot of your donations come from people that are making small donations, and I guess you guys take them small and large alike.
Yeah, the most common donation to the Oglebay Foundation is $100. So there are names that are on buildings. There are names that are on the front page of the paper about making really big gifts to the park. But the reality is it's your neighbors, it's your friends, it's the people that you see on the soccer fields or on the tennis courts that are making a $100 gift because they believe in the power of the parks and the work we do. And it's really that cumulative effort that makes Oglebay really special and unique. And not just the fact that we have a public park system, but that we have one that's known across the world that we can be very proud of. So that's one of the things that makes Oglebay really unique. So you asked a little bit, so what is the Oglebay Foundation? It's funny. So every year we host about 1,500 park professionals from across the, globe. There are 6 continents last year represented. And they always ask me, how do you have a park like this? And I said, it's about Wheeling. It's Wheeling for 100 years has invested in this park system. And that makes us different. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the country.
Well, you talked about the most common gift being $100.
Yeah.
So let's say that you're somebody that wants to, you have some money to give, or maybe you don't, but you just want to support the park. Or can people decide like, hey, I want it to go toward this thing? For example, you mentioned the ice rink, or I want it to go toward tennis or the zoo or something like that.
Yeah, if you go to our website, oglebayfoundation.org, we have all of those opportunities listed. And right on the main page, it's, if you play tennis or you care about the ice rink or you care about the zoo, that's a great example, or the gardens or the trails or trees or any of those specific purposes, you can restrict your gift towards that specific area. That's what we do. I think the foundation is a little bit different because 100% of your gift goes towards that project. So we aren't taking an administrative fee. There's no cost. My salary isn't paid out of your gift to the Oglebay Foundation. We fund that through other means. So if you give $100 and you say you want to invest that in the hiking trails, that's a great example, right? During COVID, the restrictions, the hiking trails were never busier. There are trails in the park that I hike every day, and I thought I was the only one that knew about them. And I'd run into every person I knew on the trails this spring and summer, which was fun. But if you want to make a gift to the trails, 100% of that gift goes towards the trails. And next spring, when you hike the trails, you'll see the improvements that we're going to make in those facilities.
You mentioned the pandemic, and as a nonprofit, this has to have been a challenging year for someone in your position of trying to raise money, where perhaps businesses don't have the money to give that they normally would. Individuals maybe don't have the money to give that they normally would. So, how did you work to overcome those things, and what's this year been like for you?
So that was my assumption. Going into this, I thought, oh my gosh, no one's going to be able to make a gift, right? People were out of work, there were big challenges, the stock market was down. And I'll be honest, Jamie, gifts were never higher.
Is that right?
So in the thick of the pandemic, when we were uncertain what the future looked like, right? Do you remember April and May? It just felt really uncertain. Gifts were never higher. And I think, I don't have any data to tell you why, except that we were open, the parks were open, and the gardens looked awesome, and the park felt good. And it was the place you could go you've had a stressful day, everyone was locked in their homes, and you could come walk your dog or walk with your family in the park, and it just made people feel good. And so those $100 gifts came pouring in. So I think it was those types of things that happened. So I really think the community turned back towards the parks during COVID and the pandemic. And we know that from the summer attendance numbers. So we saw tennis play was up, was double what it was last year. Golf play was up almost 50%. The zoo attendance was up 40%. All of these outdoor facilities where people could feel safe in our community, all the attendance numbers were up in the park this summer. So we feel really good about it. That was one of the main driving forces in our decision making in March when all of this started to happen. Was we had to stay open for the people of Wheeling. That's our mission. We're the public park system for the people of Wheeling. 2,400 acres between Wheeling Park and Oglebee and all the lands around it, and we had to keep that open for Wheeling. Now we fund that through the hotel operation, right? So in April and May, the hotel was pretty quiet, so there wasn't any revenue supporting that. And we found other ways, either through donors and support, and we had made really good plans and lots of resources to back that up, but we were able to keep the parks open when I don't think any other resort was able to do that. So I think that's a point of pride that every person living in Wheeling in the Ohio Valley should take some pride in, because it really took everyone's effort to make that happen.
We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue speaking with Eriks Janelsins about some of the things that the Oglebay Foundation has done and some of the things they're planning toward the future. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
During the Black Friday sales event at Sunset Motors, get employee pricing for all. Lease a 2021 Ram Bighorn for $269 per month, or get 0.9% financing for 84 months on a 2020 Ram. Get a Jeep Renegade Latitude for only $219 per month. Lease a Compass Latitude for just $249 per month, or get 0% for 72 months.
You can love when you drive at Sunset.
Tractor trailers are some of the most dangerous vehicles on the road. There are federal rules for load sizes, driver's hours, and maintenance for a reason. When big rigs don't follow these rules, entire families can be torn apart. We have the talent and the resources to take on these large companies. Hopefully, through our work, families are being helped and trucking companies are getting the message about safety. Bordas and Bordas, fighting for justice.
Welcome back to the show. I've been speaking with my guest, Eriks Janelsins, who is the president and CEO of the Oglebay Foundation. And Eric, before the break, we were talking about, some of the ways that people have supported the park, the way that the foundation supports the park. But, what are some of the plans that are going on for things that people can expect to see happening?
Yeah, so this year we completed about $3 million in projects in the park. So as we navigated the pandemic, but donors had made gifts the previous year, so lots of big projects. And so what you'll see next spring, and so we'll work all through the winter months, and next spring, improvements to the trails, expansion to the trails, some exciting things new in the garden area. The Palm Room will reopen as it was really a historic renovation and restoration of that space. It'll look more like what it looked like when Mr. Oglebee was here. So those are some fun things just out in the park that everyone can enjoy. We're looking at maybe adding a climbing wall to the playground area. So these are some of the secret things, so you can't tell anyone, right? So these are secret. We've got some really exciting things at the zoo as well, some new animal habitats, and the zoo will have another increased kind of fresh look to it. So those are exciting. Cottage renovations continue. All the meeting space will be renovated. Glessner Auditorium will look new and fresh next year. So those are all really big, exciting projects across the parks. And we've got some exciting things planned for Wheeling Park too, if the right gifts happen in the right ways. Some exciting things at Wheeling Park as well. So really across the entire system.
You mentioned the zoo. It seems like for the last couple of years, every time I go to the zoo the next year, there have been changes and improvements, and some of those things are drawing people in, I know, from all over the country. But just trying to make it have that bigger zoo feel, and that, and then also some of the things that you really can't get at a bigger zoo, like the interaction with the animals.
Yeah, I think from my standpoint, it's really we're investing in the team at the zoo. So led by Dr. Joe Greathouse, I think we have just such a phenomenal zookeeper, animal care team there, and education staff. So what we're really trying to do is build a zoo that everyone, again, in Wheeling can be proud of. So number one, it's the only zoo in the state that's accredited. It's one of very few in the world. You know, we're so lucky in Wheeling to have a zoo. And so we want to invest in it. And the exciting thing is, again, as we've been making investments, the community has come out. So memberships are up, attendance is up. All of those things are up to show that we're making the right level of investments. So we'll continue it. Every year we want to see new things that we'll keep adding, new animal habitats, some new attractions, things like that to the area. You mentioned the encounters. There are very few places. The Washington Post mentioned the zoo. These national, international publications are talking about the quality experience that you can do only at our zoo. So again, I hope everyone's really proud of that.
I get this in the mail periodically now, called the American Ideal, and it's the Oglebay Foundation, kind of a little magazine here, and it's kind of cool to see what's going on. A little letter from you at the beginning, but there's always an envelope so that you can give if you want to. But for people that maybe don't receive this, how can they go about giving or looking into ways to give that don't receive this?
Yeah, so you receive that because you're a generous donor to the Oglebay Foundation. So once you make a gift to the Oglebay Foundation, you receive this quarterly magazine named The American Ideal. That comes from a quote from Earl Ogleby's grandson when he talked about Oglebay Park and how we operate. So make a gift. And if you go online to oglebayfoundation.org or check out any of our social media channels, Facebook, you can see articles. So we republish articles from the American Ideal that talk about the impacts of giving in the parks and how we're moving the parks forward in new ways to really be a leader. So oglebayfoundation.org, articles are there, or really the social media channels too, all of those opportunities.
You know, Eric, I just want to mention before we have to go here that, I think that Oglebay is the single finest thing, in the local area, perhaps in the entire state of West Virginia, in terms of drawing people into our state and coming here and seeing such a special thing. And just want to thank you and your team, because without the foundation, its support of the parks, we wouldn't have that here. We wouldn't have that thing that we can take people to and say, look how proud we are to have this here in Ohio County, and to know that, like, when visitors come in, whether it be for, I know when I got married, people stayed up there at the cottages. I know that we had our rehearsal dinner up there at Wilson Lodge. We had our reception at the White Palace. I mean, it was like a Oglebay Wheeling Park weekend, and none of that's possible without the work the foundation does. So I just want to thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much. And really, our work is a reflection of the community and its love for the park, and so that's the most fun part. I've got the best job in the world because I get to help do what the Wheeling community does to love its park. Thanks, Jamie.
Well, hey, thanks so much for being here, Eric.
Thank you.
We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking sports. We'll talk about the Steelers having that perfect record. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
The Panhandle difference.
We were very fortunate to have worked with Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration. The team that we worked with was extremely professional. They were flexible and very receptive to our needs during that difficult time. And it gave us the opportunity to open very quickly and get our casino up and running for our customers.
With Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration, and we're gonna save you.
The magic of the season is alive at Oglebee. And hearing is believing. Experience the sounds of the season at Oglebee's Festival of Lights.
Welcome back to the show. It's time to talk sports, and we'll start in the city of Pittsburgh, where the Steelers are now 9-0 for the first time in franchise history. They were 8-0 for the first time in franchise history, so of course every win after that's going to be the first. But I was at that game, and boy, was it windy. Despite that, the Steelers threw it nearly 50 times. Ben Roethlisberger not practicing all week in quarantine. but came out as the AFC Offensive Player of the Week because of his performance. And, the running game a little bit of a concern, but if you can throw it all over the yard in the wind and do well, then so be it. But this is the fastest Pittsburgh Steelers team that I've seen. I mean, I didn't really get a full appreciation for that until being there in person. Man, this team can fly over the place. And now they get the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have only one win, at 1 o'clock this Sunday. That game will be right here on WTRF on CBS. And it shouldn't be a game that trips the Steelers up. The Jaguars will be starting an inexperienced quarterback because Minshew's hurt. I think the Steelers will be heading into that Thanksgiving night game next week against the Ravens, undefeated, still at 10-0, and I think they get a win there as well. That game will be at Heinz Field. Then they go to get Washington at home the following week. I think the Steelers will get to 12-0 before I think they have 3 really tough games in the last 4 that could be problems for them. And the Bills on the road, the Browns on the road in the finale, and then in between the Colts at home. But I think 3 of those last 4 games could be problems, but I'm not saying they'll lose them all, but just ones that to look out for. But I think the Steelers are going to get out to a 12-0 start this year. Really excited about this team. Let's set out your college football Saturday. At noon, number 9 Indiana at number 3 Ohio State. That game will be on Fox. Indiana's just overrated in my opinion. I mean, they should have lost the opener to Penn State. Penn State made some mistakes. They beat a Michigan team that's completely unmotivated in a tailspin. They're a really good team, don't get me wrong. Indiana's good, but they just don't have nearly the athletes that Ohio State does. The Buckeyes win by double digits. And by the way, WVU and Notre Dame both off this week, both have bye weeks. Also at noon, number 4 Clemson at Florida State. That game will be right here on ABC on WTRF. First game for Clemson since that Notre Dame double overtime loss. Trevor Lawrence back at quarterback after being quarantined. Florida State's 2-6. I mean, they've got talent, they always do, but they've struggled. Clemson wins this game. Then at 3:30, you can keep it on ABC the rest of the day, by the way. At number 10, Wisconsin. At number 19, Northwestern, also on ABC. Wisconsin can run the football. They play really good defense. That's a good recipe to win football games. They weren't able to play, the last couple weeks before beating Michigan very soundly on Saturday night. And I think if Northwestern can keep the game low scoring, it has a chance. But I just think Wisconsin's the better team and they get the win. Then at 7:30, Bedlam, number 14, Oklahoma State at number 18, Oklahoma. That game again on ABC right here on WTRF. Since Oklahoma lost those 2 games early to Kansas State and Iowa State, they've reeled off 4 wins in a row, including that exciting multiple overtime win against Texas. Spencer Rattler's really come on at quarterback. Chuba Howard hasn't really had the year at running back for Oklahoma State that people kind of thought he would have. I don't think Oklahoma State can score enough to stay with the Sooners. I think Oklahoma wins this one. And then at 10:30 at night, I always like these late night Pac-12 games. Number 20 USC at Utah on ESPN. That'll be Utah's first game of the year, believe it or not, on November 21st, their first game of the year. But I think they knock off the number 20 ranked Trojans, who've been really lucky to escape the last couple of weeks on games that they've won. Not this time. Utah wins this one at home. That's all the time we have this week. I hope that you have a very blessed Thanksgiving week upcoming. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you again next time on The Jamie Bordas Show.